They weren't meant to be remembered, just made quickly, eaten quietly, and forgotten by morning. Yet across America, these simple suppers once saved families when time, money, and hope were running thin. Imagine a mother in a dim kitchen, stretching scraps into something warm in just 10 minutes, meals born from urgency, not luxury. Today, they've nearly vanished, replaced by fast food and fading memory. But what if these forgotten dishes still hold something we've lost? In this video, we're bringing back 10 vintage suppers you can make in minutes, each one carrying a story that refuses to disappear. Stay with us. The clock ticked louder in kitchens like these. Evening had already settled in, and there was no time for complicated meals, only whatever could be made fast, filling, and from what little remained. One such supper quietly fed countless families, yet today, almost no one speaks of it. Creamed chipped beef on toast, once simply called SOS at the table. This dish rose to prominence during the early 20th century, especially around wartime and the years that followed. Dried, salted beef was cheap, shelf-stable, and dependable, exactly what households needed when fresh meat wasn't always available. In just minutes, it could be transformed into something warm and comforting. A pan would heat on the stove, a small amount of butter melting down into a soft sizzle. Flour followed, stirred quickly into a paste before milk was slowly poured in, thickening into a creamy base. Then came the chipped beef, thin slices, salty and rich, folded into the sauce until everything blended into one simple, hearty mixture. Poured over toasted bread, it wasn't elegant. It wasn't meant to be. But it filled empty stomachs and brought a sense of relief after long, uncertain days. Families gathered around it not because they loved it, but because they needed it. Over time, as fresh ingredients became easier to find and faster foods took over, this humble dish faded from memory. But its story remains, of survival, of simplicity, and of making something out of almost nothing. And perhaps in just 10 minutes it can still do the same today. There were nights when even lighting the stove felt like a decision weighed against time itself. The day had already taken everything, and whatever supper came next had to be fast, stretching whatever was left in the kitchen. In those moments, one quiet dish appeared again and again, simple, warm, and nearly forgotten now: fried bologna and eggs. It wasn't considered special, and that was exactly the point. Bologna was inexpensive, easy to keep, and always ready when nothing else was. Eggs, often gathered fresh or bought cheaply, became the perfect companion. Together, they formed a meal that could be on the table in minutes, no planning required. A skillet would heat quickly, the thin slice of bologna laid flat before it began to curl at the edges, releasing a familiar, salty aroma. Some would cut small slits around the sides to keep it from puffing up, while others let it form its own shape in the pan. Then, eggs were cracked right beside it, the whites spreading, the yolks holding steady as everything cooked together.
There was no ceremony in how it was served.
Sometimes it landed on a plate beside a slice of bread, other times tucked into a sandwich for something easier to eat on the go. It was the kind of supper that asked for nothing and gave exactly what was needed. As time moved on, it quietly slipped away, replaced by faster, packaged options. But this dish wasn't just about speed. It was about making do, about finding comfort in the simplest things. And even now, it waits, ready in 10 minutes, just like it always was. There were evenings when the pantry felt almost empty, yet somehow, supper still had to appear. No time for slow cooking, no luxury of fresh ingredients. Only what could be opened, stirred, and served before the night grew too late. In those quiet moments, one humble dish became a lifeline in countless homes: creamed tuna on toast. It wasn't a meal people talked about proudly, but it was one they remembered. Canned tuna, inexpensive and long-lasting, sat patiently on pantry shelves, waiting for nights exactly like these. With just a few simple steps, it could be turned into something warm, filling, and surprisingly comforting. A small pan would come to life with a bit of butter, melting into a soft, familiar scent. Flour followed, quickly stirred into a thick paste before milk was added, slowly transforming it into a smooth, creamy sauce. Then came the tuna, flaked gently into the mixture, breaking apart as it blended into the warmth of the pan. A pinch of salt, maybe a touch of pepper, and it was ready. Spoon by spoon, it was poured over crisp slices of toasted bread. Nothing fancy, nothing wasted. Just a simple supper that filled the room with quiet relief after a long day. For many families, this dish wasn't about taste, it was about survival, about stretching what little they had into something that could feed everyone at the table. And somehow it always managed to do just that. As years passed and choices grew wider, meals like this slowly disappeared. But the memory remains, of simplicity, resilience, and the quiet comfort of a meal made in minutes. Even now, it waits to be remembered again. The sun would be nearly gone by the time supper was even considered. There was no energy left for long recipes or careful preparation, only the need for something quick, warm, and filling. On nights like these, one modest dish came together with almost no effort, yet carried a quiet comfort that lingered long after the plates were empty: beans and wieners. It was a meal built entirely on what could last. Canned-baked beans sat patiently in cupboards, while simple hot dogs, cheap, reliable, and easy to cook, waited their turn. Together, they formed a supper that required little more than a single pan and a few spare minutes. The beans would be poured out first, thick and sweet, slowly heating as the stove clicked to life. Then the wieners, sliced into small rounds, were added in, softening as they warmed, releasing a savory scent that filled the kitchen. Some households stirred in a bit of ketchup or mustard, others left it just as it was. There were no strict rules, only what felt right in the moment. Served in a bowl or alongside a piece of bread, it wasn't a meal meant to impress. It was a meal meant to satisfy. Children often recognized it instantly, drawn by its familiar smell, while adults appreciated its simplicity after long, exhausting days. Over time, as kitchens filled with more options and convenience foods took over, this quiet supper faded into the background. But it once stood as a dependable answer to a simple question: what can be made quickly, with almost nothing? And even now, in just 10 minutes, it still has an answer. There were nights when even the sound of the refrigerator door opening felt uncertain. Nothing planned, nothing prepared, just a quiet search for something that could become supper before the day finally ended. In those moments, one unlikely combination came together again and again, simple yet strangely satisfying: peanut butter and banana sandwich. It wasn't cooked on a stove, and it didn't need to be. That was its quiet advantage. With just a few ingredients, it could be made in minutes, offering both comfort and enough energy to carry a family through the rest of the evening. A slice of bread would be laid out, sometimes slightly stale, sometimes fresh if luck allowed. Peanut butter was spread thick across it, rich and filling, followed by slices of banana, soft, naturally sweet, and easy to find in most homes. Another slice of bread on top, and just like that, supper was ready. Some would press it together and eat it as is, while others took an extra moment to place it in a pan, letting the outside toast lightly until the peanut butter softened and the banana warmed inside. Either way, it was quick, dependable, and required almost nothing. For many families, this wasn't just a snack. It was dinner on nights when there was no time, no money, or simply no energy left to cook. It asked for very little, but gave enough to keep going. As years passed, meals like this were pushed aside, seen as too simple for modern tables. But its story still lingers, of quiet resilience, of making something meaningful out of the bare minimum. And even now, in 10 minutes or less, it still holds that same quiet promise. There were evenings when the kitchen felt colder than usual, not from the air, but from the absence of options. The day had stretched too far, and whatever supper came next had to be quick, simple, and made from whatever could be found without much effort. On nights like these, one dish quietly returned to the table, unassuming but deeply familiar: egg in a hole. It didn't require much, just bread, an egg, and a bit of heat. Yet somehow, it carried a sense of comfort that went beyond its simplicity. Perhaps it was the way it turned the most basic ingredients into something warm and complete in just a few minutes. A slice of bread would be laid flat, and a small circle cut from its center, sometimes with a glass, sometimes just by hand. Butter melted in a pan, and the bread was placed down, the empty space in the middle waiting. Then, an egg was cracked directly into that opening, settling into the center as it began to cook. The edges of the bread turned golden, crisping slowly, while the egg firmed up just enough to hold its shape. Some flipped it once for a firmer yolk. Others left it soft, letting it spill slightly when cut. Even the small piece removed from the center was often toasted alongside, nothing wasted. It was served immediately, often eaten without much thought, yet remembered years later. Not because it was extraordinary, but because it appeared exactly when it was needed most. As time moved forward, meals like this faded into the background, replaced by faster, packaged options. But this quiet dish still remains, a reminder that even the simplest things can carry warmth, comfort, and just enough to get through another day. Evening shadows had a way of creeping into kitchens long before supper was ready. Families were tired, ingredients were scarce, and the clock seemed to mock any attempt at a proper meal. On nights like these, one simple dish quietly returned to tables across America, beloved not for its elegance, but for its speed and reliability: macaroni and cheese from scratch. This wasn't the box version most people think of today. It was made with what could be found on short notice: dry pasta, a bit of butter, milk, and cheese that could be grated or sliced thin. In 10 minutes, it could transform from a handful of pantry items into something warm, creamy, and satisfying. A pot of salted water would come to a quick boil, the pasta sliding in to soften. Butter melted in a separate pan while the cheese was prepared. As the pasta cooked, milk and butter were whisked together into a simple sauce, and the cheese folded in until it melted smoothly. Once drained, the pasta joined the sauce, absorbing every bit of creamy flavor. Served hot, it was filling and comforting, a dish that could quiet a hungry stomach and bring a small sense of relief after a long day. Children often dug in with little ceremony, adults quietly appreciating its simplicity and efficiency. Over time, the homemade version slowly disappeared from kitchens, replaced by prepackaged boxes or faster convenience foods. But the memory of it, of families gathering around a steaming bowl in minutes, remains. Even now, in just 10 minutes, this humble macaroni and cheese can transport anyone back to those simple, quiet evenings when a quick meal meant more than just food. It meant comfort, warmth, and the reassurance that even small efforts could feed a family's heart. Some nights, the pantry offered little more than a few staples and a ticking clock reminding families that supper couldn't wait. In those moments, a dish quietly appeared on tables across homes, simple, fast, and surprisingly satisfying: grilled cheese sandwich with tomato soup. It wasn't elaborate, but it carried a sense of warmth that felt almost magical in its simplicity. Bread, butter, and cheese were all that were needed. Bread was spread lightly with butter and pressed onto a hot skillet until golden brown. Cheese melted inside, soft and gooey, stretching slightly with every bite. Meanwhile, a can of tomato soup, staple of many kitchens, was heated, filling the room with its familiar, tangy aroma. Together, the two created a balance of textures and flavors: crunchy, buttery bread embracing the creamy cheese, paired with the tang and warmth of tomato soup. It was fast, filling, and comforting, perfect for evenings when energy was low and time was even lower. For many families, this pairing was more than food. It was a brief moment of connection. Children's laughter around the table, parents quietly savoring a few minutes of calm, It became a ritual of sorts, carried out in homes across America with whatever ingredients were at hand. As the years passed, recipes evolved, convenience foods took over, and this once beloved supper became almost forgotten. Yet its story remains. A reminder that some of the most cherished meals were born out of necessity and simplicity. Even today, in just 10 minutes, a grilled cheese sandwich with tomato soup can bring back the quiet comfort of those nostalgic evenings, proving that some dishes never truly fade, they only wait to be remembered. Evenings in many homes were often a race against time. Work, chores, and the endless demands of the day left little energy for elaborate cooking. In these moments, a humble dish quietly returned to the table again and again, simple enough to prepare in 10 minutes, yet satisfying enough to fill hungry stomachs: hot ham and egg sandwich. It was a staple born from necessity. Leftover ham, thinly sliced, paired with eggs that could be fried or scrambled, created a warm and filling meal without fuss. Bread was toasted quickly or left soft, depending on what the family preferred. Butter sizzled in the pan, ham slices were heated just enough to release their savory aroma, and eggs were added, cooking until firm but tender. Some households layered the eggs and ham directly on the bread. Others stacked them carefully, letting the flavors mingle as they cooled slightly. A dash of salt and pepper, perhaps a slice of cheese if it was available, and the sandwich was ready. What it lacked in elegance, it made up for in comfort and speed, a meal that could appear almost instantly and disappear just as fast from eager hands. This wasn't just food. It was a quiet solution to the evening's problem, a way to ensure everyone ate without delay or stress. Families remembered it not for its sophistication but for its reliability, for the sense of normalcy it brought after long, tiring days. Though modern convenience foods gradually replaced it, the hot ham and egg sandwich remains a testament to a time when quick meals were a necessity, and even the simplest combinations could bring warmth, satisfaction, and a quiet sense of home. Even now, it can be recreated in 10 minutes, just as it always was. When the day had stretched too long and the pantry seemed nearly bare, families still found ways to gather around the table. One supper quietly returned time and again, simple, fast, and comforting: sloppy Joe on toast. Originally a Depression-era creation, this dish thrived on minimal ingredients. Ground beef, or whatever protein was available, was browned quickly in a skillet, onions sautéed if there were any on hand, and a simple tomato-based sauce pulled it all together. Seasoned lightly with salt, pepper, and sometimes a touch of sugar or ketchup, it became a warm, hearty filling that could be spooned directly onto toasted bread. It wasn't gourmet, but it was practical. 10 minutes were all it took to turn humble pantry items into something filling and satisfying. Children loved the messy, flavorful bites, while parents appreciated the ease of preparation after long, exhausting days. There was a quiet joy in watching everyone dig in, knowing the family was fed without stress or delay. Over the decades, as convenience foods and fast-cooking alternatives grew popular, this simple supper slowly faded from everyday kitchens. Yet its story remains, a reminder that even the simplest meals carried weight, offering nourishment and comfort when it was needed most. Even today, sloppy Joe on toast can be recreated in just 10 minutes. Fast, satisfying, and steeped in nostalgia, it's a reminder that sometimes the most memorable meals are those made in a hurry, with whatever the pantry holds, feeding both body and memory in equal measure. And there you have it, 10 forgotten vintage suppers that can be made in just 10 minutes, each one carrying a piece of American history and the quiet comfort of simpler times. These dishes may have faded from modern kitchens, but their stories remind us that ingenuity, resourcefulness, and care could turn even the humblest ingredients into something meaningful. Trying them today isn't just about nostalgia. It's about connecting with the past, honoring the families who relied on these meals, and discovering how quick, simple food can still bring warmth to the table. Which one will you try first?